Well, I think, politicians and candidates respond to what people are talking about. So I think it's our responsibility as students and moms and dads and policymakers to keep asking our candidates about what about education. Don't forget about education. Think about education. I'm proud to have worked for then Governor Bush when he was running for president in 2000, and he made education a huge part of his campaign. The first day in office, he showed up and started working on No Child Left Behind. We worked that entire year to pass No Child Left Behind, and it has been a huge part. In fact, if I do say modestly, probably his most significant domestic achievement. So he's an education president in my mind. That's a great question, Teresa. I think some do and some don't, probably. I do think there is a little bit of and I worry about it because I've traveled a lot all around the world, and I see young people and families that are much more motivated, much hungrier, much more interested in having high quality education opportunities for their students and for themselves. They hold themselves to very high standards. And I often think that's not the case here. We sort of give ourselves some excuses. We're quite complacent about the achievement gap. I mean, we ought to be outraged that half of our minority kids are getting out of high school on time, when most of the best jobs are going to require some college. So yeah, I think we're a little too casual about what's going on in our schools, and that starts with parents and their expectations for their own children. Well, again, this is back to the local decision making. These are not the decisions that are made at the federal government. But I have to say that I honestly just sort of reject often this assumption that we cannot teach kids to read and cipher, i.e. do math on grade level, and have art and music. I just reject that. There is a lot of administrative bureaucracy in our system. What I often see is that we make budget cuts at the expense of kids as opposed to the expense of adults. So at the same time, when programs are being cut, we see salary raises and benefit increases and those sorts of things. And I think obviously that's certainly within the prerogative of local school boards. But I think we have to start really holding ourselves accountable for a system that serves kids at least as much as it does adults. I love To Kill a Mockingbird. It's one of my favorite books, period. And Harper Lee just got, last year actually, thanks to the First Lady, the National Medal of Freedom, which is the highest civilian honor that an author can get. I would read a college prep guide. Fisk or something like that. I'm not trying to make an endorsement, but consider college as an opportunity. Explore institutions around you. So something like that. That sounds maybe a little bit boring. And gosh, I feel like I'm getting a lot of high school literature right now because I have a junior in high school, and my own junior is having me reread actually The Catcher in the Rye, which she has totally been captivated by. And so I'm rereading Catcher in the Rye many moons after I read it in the first place. So I think that'd be a good one. It's a great book.
That's a good one.
Yeah. Well, again, back to local school boards and local policymakers. I think when you use the word censorship, that connotes something that offends people, including me. But I do think there's a level of literature that's appropriate for young teenagers and frankly for any of us, that can be used, that is interesting, that's engaging, that's edgy, that's profound, that's thoughtful, all of those things without crossing into areas where it creates controverscy. I think it's sometimes those sorts of dramas I think take away often from our real work in education. There's plenty of great literature that is fully within the range of acceptability, if you will, to everybody. Well, I think because those are the basics, and to be an informed and educated human being in the world, there are some things that people ought to know. They're great resources. It's not an accident. No Child Left Behind can be expanded to include high schools. No Child Left Behind is about grades 3 through 8, and we're seeing the biggest increases in those grades. but high schools still are really not terribly accountable, and we don't have a lot of information about what's wrong and what to do. So with more assessment information, with more disaggregated data, we can fix that. And we can get more of our minority students out of high school on time. Why don't they? Well, I think, one of the things that all high schools do is struggle with, what kind of a well-rounded curriculum can we offer? It's important that, and this maybe relates to a little bit to Teresa's question, is, more often our high schools are finding themselves needing to teach reading and basic math. And so, they're trying to catch kids up that lacked basic skills in elementary and middle school. And so that has distracted them often from their first work of a rigorous college preparatory high school curriculum. Now, that's not an excuse. We have to do both. We have to do a better job of, helping kids catch up and providing a well-rounded curriculum. One assignment I would give parents and teens is to ask your school district, how do you allocate rigorous coursework? How many AP classes are offered, at the elite public schools, and how many are offered in inner city schools? I mean, I've asked that question in my own local community, and it's pretty telling. And this is part of parent engagement and requiring or demanding or asking your school board to stop rationing rigor into our high schools. Truancy. Well, I think again it relates to some of the questions that Amanda asked. I mean, I think kids end up leaving school often because they are bored to death. They don't find anything that's interesting, that's relevant, that's engaging, or they're often so behind in basic skills that they're lost. I mean, it makes no sense. You can't read the textbook. You're not going to want to show up and engage in the content. So I think one of the things that No Child Left Behind has done is really provide us some data about which category particular students are in. We have to get much more customized and personalized, and we need to say, how are we going to get Teresa out of high school? How are we going to get Amanda out of high school, and Margaret and John, and be very customized about our approach. My own daughter's in school with uniforms. I love it. I think parents love it. Yeah, I mean, but again, it's a local decision. But as a parent, I love it. Well, here's the good news, Teresa. First, teaching is, often highly sought out, and Teach for America, the program that takes, highly qualified college graduates and asks them to teach for 2 years immediately after college, typically, is one of the most popular recruiting programs on campus. But I think we can put our money where our mouths are. We can pay our teachers more. We can pay them more when they do the most challenging work in education and when they get results. Absolutely. I also think we can break down barriers and make it less bureaucratic for people who are willing and interested, whether they're at mid-career or just out of college, to enter teaching. Plenty, not too much, but certainly practice makes perfect, and that's what homework is all about. Well, I think it can often be a worthwhile thing to do. I think it depends on the student. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. Higher education can and should be accessible throughout one's lifetime, but I think that's an individual decision. No, I don't, and here's why. We are seeing an increase in scores. We're seeing the achievement gap close because we're finally paying attention to the achievement of everybody. No child left behind, no doubt. I mean, this idea that we are going to hold ourselves accountable, and we mean it, for the achievement of every student. Well, obviously this is something that is not really in the purview of the federal department. These are state policy issues and sometimes local school board issues, depending on how the governance is ordered. I think that's something that parents and local policymakers need to look at, and they ought to look at what works. They ought to look at some data before they make decisions about what policies ought to be. Again, I think we have to go to the root cause, and let's get customized and personalized about each individual kid and say, what's it going to take to prevent those sorts of incidents in the first place. My belief about secondary education, that we are rationing rigor that it's not surprising to me that that some kids are not college ready when they haven't been offered a rigorous course of study in high school. Of course, they're not college ready. They haven't taken a college ready curriculum, and we can't expect them to know what they haven't been taught. In fact, one good example of that, I sent $500 million back to the U.S. Treasury in aid dedicated to low-income students because those students had not been offered, nor had they taken a rigorous course of study. Now, that's not to say that, you know, students and parents need to hold themselves to much higher standards and take the rigorous courses that are available. You know, if you have, you know, 10 AP classes, you ought to be in them. Because those are the things that colleges are going to look at for admissions and the like. But the rationing of rigor that I see. They can. That's why some states and local districts have tried to level that out by having test prep programs offered for free as part of the college admissions process. I don't know what's going on here in Boston with respect to that. I know there are some of the providers are providing some things that are very inexpensive online that have some of the same benefits of learning test taking skills and practicing those things that are trying to be more equalized, if you will. But they can provide an advantage, and I think, again, back to, you know, it's back to rigorous coursework. Those are things that, you know, if students take advantage of those things, then they'll be prepared to take these tests. It's pretty awesome, I have to say. Sometimes, particularly when we're talking about the war in Iraq, or you know, terrorism, and you know, the things that are happening around the world, when we're talking about the economy, when we're talking about hurricanes, it is amazing. And I think, you know, what's somebody like Margaret, you know, Dudar was my maiden name, doing, sitting in a cabinet meeting, and it's amazingly interesting. I would highly recommend a career in public service and public policy to young people. It's fascinating, and I've loved every minute of it.